Flavor notes in whiskey are complete BS. Or at least that's the comment that I get every now and then on some of the videos. Maybe when I get too exaggerated with some of my flavor notes, but I tend to go deep with it. I love breaking stuff down and trying to articulate it the best I can. But within that, I've had conversations with people that do find it intimidating to throw out flavor notes, to even sit around a whiskey table and name things. People feel intimidated that they'll say something wrong. So I'm going to try something new today. This is the first time that I've tried it in this format. Going to be looking forward to feedback on this one so I can revise and refine this talk track over time. But I would like to walk through some ways to walk through tasting notes, how to practice on your own. That way you can be more confident if you want to spit things out while you're talking to people around a whiskey table at some type of whiskey share. So thank you for joining me today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining me, everybody, for another Tuesday discussion. Here on Tuesdays, all the content is inspired by questions and comments that we get either on YouTube, Instagram, or from our wonderful Patreon community. And today's video is all about tasting notes, confusion around tasting notes, the thought that tasting notes are just all BS, it's all fluffery. It's not. We're just having fun with it. But I am going to show you over the course of this video how to navigate it if this does confuse you or cause you any trepidation, or you just don't know where to start. Maybe this is a good way to do it. And I got my Whiskey Riff Lounge Glen. Cheers to Kelsey. And I am going to do this video using the Evan Williams 1783. I wanted to do this video on something that is accessible and is everywhere. This is $18. And for me, this is my favorite sub $20 whiskey. It goes right hand in hand with Evan Williams Bottle and Bond, which I know is one that's near and dear to people's hearts as well. But for me, the 1783, this thing just rocks. And that's a good reason to use it for the tasting notes, because despite it being $18 and 90 proof, it does pack a lot of unique flavors, which allows us to go through this video and pick those things apart. So for this video, I'm going to pull up a presentation here. I'll pop up in the corner. But one thing that you can find online are flavor wheels. So you can go and you can Google this. This is an image that I got from Modern Thirst. That is probably the most common one that I see people use, but you will find more if you go out there and Google it and Google image these, and you can print this out on your own. The reason that I use this one is that I feel like it is the most straightforward of some of the wheels on there. Now, of course, there are more flavor notes that are possible than what is on this wheel, and that's what differentiates this one from other ones you might find, where people have taken the wheel on themselves and added layers, added flavor notes. And, notice here that this is 3 layers deep. We're going to go through those layers in just a moment, but I have seen other whiskey wheels that are 4 layers deep, 5 layers deep, 6 layers deep, as they try to get to specific notes and descriptions and breaking things down. So we're going to start out in the middle of the wheel. Core flavors. It's fruity, it's woody, it's grainy, it's sweet, it's spicy. Quite frankly, those are the only descriptors you actually need to describe a whiskey in some general format to just articulate what you're tasting. This is sweet and it comes across a little woody and I get the fruits. That could be your tasting note description if you don't want to go a layer deeper or you don't feel comfortable with it yet. When you go down to that second layer, things get more specific. So if you look under wood, it's more about, well, is it oaky wood? Does it have like that deep, rich oak? Or is it more of a light, woody sensation? And the other thing that this flavor wheel has under wood, which I wouldn't think of that way for myself personally, but it does put the nuttiness in there. So if you're drinking like a Jim Beam product that has some nut-forward flavors, that's where you'd find yourself on the flavor wheel. For grain, breaking down into spicy grains or sweet grains. For the sweet flavors, which is typically what I love the most and spend most of my time describing, they break down into buttery, candy, or baked. For spices, earthy and aromatic. And then for fruits, is it fruity? Is it floral? Then you can go that third layer deeper. Things get more and more specific, concentrating on my favorite category, which is the sweetness. If you go under buttery, there's vanilla, caramel. Under candy, there's butterscotch. Under baked, there's chocolate and baked goods. Those are the type of notes that I love. But fruits too. We do love when we have a good fruity whiskey. You can see the fruits up here: cherries, plums, orange, lemon, apricots. Goes on and on and on, but it gets more specific as you go layers deeper. But there's nothing that's saying that you have to get to the third level or try to invent a fourth level, a fifth level, a sixth level. Uh, Nothing saying that you need to do that. If you just want to operate in the fact that it's, hey, it's spicy and it's sweet, that is completely legitimate. Be as specific as you feel comfortable being, but confidently go into it and practice on something like this wheel. The other thing that really helps me is also to think about these flavor notes on some type of scale or spectrum, from bright to dark. For me, a lot of the times I even equate it to music. You know, you got high notes, you got low notes, you got these notes playing a melody. But that does help steer you towards some of the flavor notes as well. Let's take fruits as an example. So if I am saying, hey, it's a bright fruit, well, there's only so many fruits then that are going to be bright. Am I talking about apples, maybe melon, maybe I'm into tropical? But when I describe it as bright and narrow it in on being bright and light flavored fruits, then automatically it narrows the window of possibilities. Whereas if I lean into dark, well, maybe we're getting into dark cherries or plums or dark grapes. Maybe there's something around those layers. And of course, as I mentioned, it would be everything in between. But you can do that to each one of the categories as well. You know, is it a bright sweetness, a dark sweetness, a light wood, or a dark wood? So that is another way that you can kind of help your mind narrow in on things, because quite frankly, when you have the combination of these different words and they're either bright or dark, it narrows what it can be or how you can articulate it. You're not going to describe it as a dark apple, typically. You know, it just doesn't make sense. So let's get into this Evan Williams here. So for the rest of the tasting, I am going to go through some tasting notes live and then actually walk through that whiskey wheel as we do it. If you have this bottle and you want to follow along, I mean, that's kind of the point of this conversation, but we are using the 1783 Evan Williams to get into it. Once again, my favorite sub $20 whiskey. Gosh, that thing is so good. So let's get into this. I am going to track the flavors that I'm talking about on the wheel as I go. Now, I know some of these things are a little small in terms of the print, so I can bring it up full screen in just a moment, but do encourage you to just print this out at home too. Have it side by side. A lot of the times, all you're trying to do is connect the dots in your head with these flavors so that you can recall them again later. The more dots you connect, the more that you connect them, the easier they are to connect on other whiskeys and other tastings. So with this Evan Williams here, I'm going to go in for a sip. Oh man, really, really do love that. It has a whole lot of flavor notes. We're going to go through all of them. The one that really sticks out to me up front is the fact that there is a bit of woodiness here. You know, it doesn't come across necessarily as old, but it doesn't come across as young either. That's why I would describe it more in this cedar range of a woodiness. You know, when it comes to describing something as oak or oaky, I mean, we're typically getting up there in 8, 9, 10 years before I describe something as oak or oaky. But the wood in this one, you can taste the barrel, and thus why I'm calling it wood. Let's go in for another sip. Generic flavors here, at least for bourbons, when you call these things out, but it's perfectly fine to call this out when you do taste it. But we do have caramel and vanilla. So if I call out caramel and vanilla, what am I trying to articulate? I'm mainly trying to articulate that I'm getting a lot of sweetness. Now, this one puts it under buttery sweetness. Buttery to me is actually its own category that I get in whiskeys. Thus, why I think people have manipulated these wheels over time to fit their own profiles or what they see as they try to describe things, but still following the lines here so that you can kind of see it as I describe it as well. So let's go in for another sip here, and then I think I got like 2 or 3 more flavors to call out. Cheers, everybody. So the other thing I get on this one, and I always try to get as specific as possible when I start talking about bakery goods. This one would be essentially the type of pastry that is present on the outside of an eclair. I tried to look up if it had a very specific name to it. Maybe it's not Phyllidough, but something like that. Uh, but I always try to be specific there because a lot of times I'll call it pie crust or donuts or elephant ears if it has like a fried dough sensation. Uh, I already said the pie crust. Oh, coffee cake. I've been getting coffee cake a lot recently. Different types of cake, yellow cake, chocolate cake, red velvet cake. So that bakery good category is one that you can actually get very deep on with that fourth, fifth, sixth layers I was describing before. But hey, if you just simply called it, hey, it tastes like a baked good, that is a fine description of something. Let's get into the last flavor note here. The other thing I get on this, it really pops up mid palate into the finish. There's a lot of fruits on here. Now, one thing that you will hear people do is kind of like punt or call out a category if they can't get too specific. So when I'm tasting cherry, I'll call out the fact it's cherry. If I'm tasting plum, I'll call out the fact it's plum. Apricot, I'll call that out. In this particular case, I think I want to call out something that's kind of in this mid range of fruit flavors. And I don't really have a good specific descriptor on it. So I'll call it stone fruit. Still conveys to you that it's fruity, it's in that range of fruits, and you can see kind of that spectrum there. And I just circled them all because it's just kind of in that range. It's not, in high definition. It's like watching TV in 480p or something. Man, was it 480i? Man, that's really getting old school. But, it's just not defined, at least for me to get specific on it. So I take that overall category and describe it as specifically as I can. And that's how you walk then through those flavor notes. The last one that I will call out here, I particularly get it on the finish, but there is a nice honey note. And I am a big sucker for honey notes, particularly on the finish. And you can see that one falls into the category of candy and honey is where they have it there. So that walks you through what we have here with the Evan Williams. Now, if you sat at a table and you told me, hey, tasting this thing, it's sweet, it's fruity, and it's woody. Completely legitimate flavor notes. Just go with that first layer. You don't have to go any deeper if you want to describe things. If anything, I've seen some of the distillers currently and of the past that I've seen doing interviews, they will describe things that way as well. And they don't see a reason why we try to get so specific. It's sweet, it's spicy, it's woody. Just stop there. Now, if you went that layer deeper, you could just describe it as fruity, woody, buttery, candy sweetness, some baked goods. Pretty good tasting notes if you just stick around that outer wheel. And then as you see, you get more specific as you go into that third wheel. And then if I went to the fourth layer, fifth layer with all of my baked good descriptions, that's where that mainly comes from. But hopefully that helps walk through an example like this. I think it gets really fun walking through the tasting notes, and I love listening to other people's tasting notes. So one of the things that we do here on the channel from time to time is that we will send each other blinds, but send them to each person that's going to be competing out of order. So like one person has something like this. Let's just say it's the Evan Williams 1783. Sample A in one flight, but then the next person is sample B, and the next person is sample C, and they don't even know that it's Evan Williams 1783. they've got to use their tasting notes and descriptions and articulate their way through it and communicate their way through it to describe what they're tasting and figure out if they're calling out the same bottle, even though it's under different letters on all of their flight boards. And very successful doing so whenever we do these type of experiences. It can get there. You've just got to communicate way through it. So hopefully that helps with some of the skepticism and or questions I've gotten about tasting notes, and hopefully this was a fun exercise. Let me know how you liked this exercise in general. This is probably a talk track I'm going to try to refine over time as people have questions or want to dive into it, or just don't give tasting notes because they're afraid of what they'll say doesn't resonate. Hey, just go with that first layer. You're fine. Call it sweet, call it spicy, call it woody. That's all you really have to do if you don't want to get deeper into it. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. Once again, you're just connecting all of these nodes in your brain, firing all those synapses, connecting those dots. And that's how you get to those flavor notes over time and how we do those blind flights. So thank you for joining me today, Whiskey Friends. If you've got a question for a future Tuesday video, let us know in the comments. And then until next time, catch you on the next one. Goodbye, buddy.
Jeff, just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again.